Good evening, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would talk about this little situation that I found very particularly interesting. And this is going to be over the 135-pound division. And of course, the 135-pound division, there's a lot of uproar happening as of lately because, of course, the main champion there, or the main unified champion there, of course, is the newly crowned Aussie champion, Mr. George Kambosos Jr. And of course, the way overall that he was able to get crowned those titles is because, of course, he was able to beat Mr. Teofimo Lopez in an upset victory. Now, of course, certain people would say, oh, well, I didn't think it was an upset victory. What I'll say is this. I gave George Kambosos about a 30% chance in that fight. I knew that potentially maybe it could be a tough fight for Teofimo Lopez, especially if he was not going into that fight motivated and did not take him seriously. And to be quite honest with you, I don't think he went into that fight either or. So it is what it is. I think that's a big part of the reason why he ended up losing that fight. That's not me overall necessarily making excuses for Mr. Teofimo Lopez, but I think that is kind of the same reason why Mr. Anthony Joshua lost to an Andy Ruiz the first time around. I think he took a look at the dude and he said, you know what, I'm going to knock this dude out within about 3 to 4 rounds. He's really not going to be that competitive for me. And I think Teofimo Lopez made a very, very, very big mistake, and he's now going to have to live with that for the rest of his career. And now we're going to see if Mr. Teofimo Lopez, if he's just going to be a person that was able to get that one very big win in his career over Vasyl Lomachenko and then never get another big win again, or if he's going to come back in style. We'll see what happens, but it's not going to be easy because, of course, Mr. Teofimo Lopez, he has to now fight at the 140-pound division, and if there are certain people that do remain there, like a Jose Ramirez or like a Josh Taylor, we'll see where Josh Taylor goes, but by the time if there is a Josh Taylor versus Teofimo Lopez fight, Josh Taylor already may have 1 or 2 losses because he may go up to the welterweight division, and this is just my personal opinion about Josh Taylor. Even though I think he is a very decent fighter, I don't know how well he's going to do at the welterweight division. At best, I think maybe he's going to do just as good as what a Sean Porter or Danny Garcia did, which is decently great, but not super duper great. It just is what it is. When I take a look at George Kambosos Jr., this is just my personal opinion of him. I think that he's a very decent fighter, and I think all in all that, he is a person that is a decently skilled fighter. But when I take a look at him, and I know a lot of people are going to, think that I'm going too far with this or that I'm a little bit cold and harsh for saying this, but when I take a look at Mr. George Kambosos Jr., all I see is someone that is slim pickings. It just is what it is. I know a lot of people would disagree. I'm not going to say that he 100% could not pull off some of these upsets, but when we really take a look at George Kambosos Jr., do we really truly believe that he is going to win some of these bigger fights at the 135-pound division? Of course, he was able to defeat Teofimo Lopez, but there's even been some other channels like Mr. Boxing Eagle that I've seen. And Eagle, even though I don't always necessarily disagree with what he has to say, these channels, you can tell, they intuitively know, they know the exact same thing that I know. That whoever gets to George Kambosos first, when it comes down to it, is basically like an injured zebra or an injured wildebeest in the Serengeti. You got a leopard looking at it, you got a cheetah looking at it, you got a lion looking at it. Who is going to get to that thing first? It just is what it is. All right, basically you have all these predators in the midst waiting overall to get their hands on that title. Can George Kambosos really overall do enough to beat those fighters? I highly doubt it. It just is what it is. I know a lot of people that are going to highly disagree. That's not me saying that he does not have any chance. If he somehow were able to pull off the upset against Vasyl Lomachenko or or Devin Haney or Ryan Garcia, I would not be very, very surprised. Or I wouldn't be shell-shocked, let me say that. But in almost every single one of those fights, I don't know if I'd favor him in any of them. It just is what it is. And I think that I'm not the only one that knows that. That's why when it comes down to it, George Kambosos, he's picking very carefully who he chooses next. And I think that is the main reason why, more than likely, he probably is not going to choose Mr. Devin Haney. Now, apparently, from what I've been hearing from certain channels or certain people, Devin Haney has allegedly priced himself out. Listen, I don't know overall what necessarily is going on behind the scenes, but if you were to ask me personally, just what I personally see on the surface without a super duper in-depth breakdown, when it comes down to it, does George Kambosos seem overly interested to me to face out of a Devin Haney next? No, he does not. And when it comes down to it, I wouldn't necessarily blame him. And the reason why that is because Devin Haney is in a very similar situation to what Guillermo Rigondeaux and Demetrius Bubu Andrade was. I think that both of those fighters, to be honest with you, are better than what a Devin Haney ever has been. That's not me saying that Devin Haney is not a decent fighter. I thought that his one performance against Jorge Linares, even though that probably was a completely washed version of him, but it is what it is. I thought that Devin Haney looked phenomenal in that fight. He looked very, very good. And I said, wow, If he continues facing people like that, he could give people a lot of problems. But then when I seen him against Jojo Diaz, I just think that he has a very leaky defense. I think that he's someone that, even though he's very decently slick, he reminds me of a Mayweather impersonator. Someone overall that, is very, very decent, but someone that, in my opinion, he's never going to be on that same level as a Floyd Mayweather Jr. To be honest with you, what do I think is going to happen with Devin Haney? He's probably going to end up as another Ersan Lara, just a weaker version of him, in my opinion, or another Demetrius Bubu Andrade. Someone that, unfortunately, because of the promotion and overall because even though he has a certain amount of fans, he's not someone overall that, when it comes down to, like I said, he's not someone overall that has an extremely wide fan base or an extremely pungent fan base, or potent fan base. He's probably going to get left behind by a certain amount of these fighters. It just is what it is. Because if Vasyl Lomachenko gets this fight next, and if he beats that of a George Kambosos, is it possible that he goes after Devin Haney? It's possible. I'm not ruling it out, but I believe that Vasyl Lomachenko, he understands that he's getting up there in age. Vasyl Lomachenko, at the current moment in time, is 33 years old. He's going to be turned 34 next year, or this year, actually, when it comes down to it. More than likely, he's going to go after Gervonta Tank Davis. Ryan Garcia, it's possible that he could face Devin Haney. That actually might be the most likely fight for him. Gervonta Tank Davis, he does not seem overly interested in the fight either, and apparently Mayweather Promotions, they don't want to pay that of a Devin Haney. So Devin Haney is really in a shitty situation. It is what it is, but at the end of the day, some fighters have to deal with it. So unfortunately, Devin Haney, what he more than likely is going to have to do is that eventually he's just going to have to bite the bullet, move up to 140 pounds, and try to face someone there. You're either going to probably have to face a Montana Love, or Jose Ramirez, maybe even Jose Pedraza, face someone like a Josh Taylor. You're more than likely going to have to face one of those guys. It just is what it is. And to be quite honest with you, Devin Haney, just like when I take a look at Jamal Charlo or David Benavidez or Demetrius Bubu Andrade, even though I think that they do have a certain amount of boxing ability and craft, and maybe I would say that Devin Haney, maybe for his division, you could argue that he's swifter and slicker than what some of those fighters are debatably. At the end of the day, when Devin Haney actually finally faces someone with his own same size, because Devin Haney is pretty much a natural 140 pounder when you talk about his stature and when you talk about his length. When he finally actually faces that boxer, that may be a Josh Taylor or a Regis Prograis or a Jose Ramirez or someone all in all that is going to be willing to exchange with him and fight back with him and is actually on a decent A grade level, that is at least on an A minus to A grade level. I'm not quite sure how Devin Haney is going to react to that fight. He could pull it off, but it also could be very difficult because, like I said, Devin Haney, when I take a look at him, at least through a clearer lens and through a microscope, he looks like a very good to great Mayweather impersonator. But that's what he reminds me of, an impersonator. He is not Floyd Mayweather Jr. That is not me insulting him. I think that he's a very decent fighter, and I would like to see Devin Haney get his shot. But at the end of the day, do I think that he more than likely is going to get his shot over George Kambosos? No, I do not. Because George Kambosos, when he takes a look at Devin Haney compared to his other options, I think when George Kambosos takes a look at Devin Haney, he says, you know what? Why would I overall risk my O and risk losing the belts and losing my possible pound-for-pound acclaim against a fighter that, sure, he can give me a decent payday, but in terms of pound-for-pound appeal and a certain amount of other things, he overall does not bring as much to the table, in his opinion, probably as a Lomachenko or as a Ryan Garcia or overall as a Gervonta Tank Davis. Now, some people would say, well, why the hell would you bring up Ryan Garcia? Because he doesn't have any pound-for-pound acclaim. That's true, but what Ryan Garcia does have is star power. And I know a lot of people, they're basically going to be saying, oh, what are you talking about? He doesn't have any star power. He's never sold any pay-per-views, blah, blah, blah. Listen, let me just state this. I know which fighters have star power and which fighters don't have star power. Ryan Garcia basically is one of the worst kept secrets in boxing. Basically, what does that mean? He's everywhere. Ryan Garcia is basically talked about everywhere. He has millions of followers on YouTube. He has millions of followers, I believe, on Instagram. Every social media site that he has, Ryan Garcia is known about. Now, is he highly proven? No, he's not. But he's a fighter, in my opinion, that if George Kambosos could get his hands on him, he would potentially face him next because he knows that that's a very, very decent payday. And on top of that, when it comes down to it, if he were able to beat Ryan Garcia, that would put his face on the map. So it is what it is. But anyways, we're going to see what Mr. 78 Sports TV has to say about this possible situation. Let's get into it.
78 Sports TV here. Salute to the mighty LDBC, Lions Den Boxing Community. For those who don't know, now you know. Smash that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you'll be notified when I drop a new video. So, According to reports, George Kambosos Jr. versus Devin Haney talks have reportedly stalled over financials. I'm reading from Michael Benson's Twitter. All right. It said George Kambosos Jr. versus Devin Haney talks have reportedly stalled over financials. It's claimed Kambosos Jr.'s team remained in talks with Vasyl Lomachenko fight. All right. Through also now discussing a
And I believe more than likely that Vasyl Lomachenko fight is going to happen next. I think George Kambosos takes a look at Vasyl Lomachenko. I think he has a very high regard for him. And I think he says, if I'm able to defeat Vasyl Lomachenko, I'm really going to have a great amount of pound for pound acclaim, and I'm going to be taken very much for real. Now, a lot of people may say, well, why do you think that he wouldn't be taken for real after he just pulled off a very good upset? He already beat a top 10 pound for pound fighter when he defeated Teofimo Lopez. Right, but there's a difference between a one-hit wonder and someone that can do it repeatedly. And that's, in my opinion, what George Kambosos is looking for. Fighting Devin Haney for George Kambosos at the current moment in time is very, very dangerous. Because why would you face someone overall that, once again, does not have a very great pound-for-pound appeal? Someone that is probably not going to... I mean, don't get me wrong. Beating Devin Haney, of course, is going to get you extra attention. Don't get me wrong. It could make you a bigger star. That's not what I'm saying. But beating Vasyl Lomachenko or Ryan Garcia or Gervonta Tank Davis, those are even bigger fights in terms of making you a bigger star. So I don't necessarily have a problem with those fights, but what I will say is this. Do I think that George Kambosos wants to face Devin Haney? No, I don't think he does.
Deal to face Ryan Garcia after both have interim bouts. So, let me make something clear. This is what's out there. This is the narrative that George Kambosos' team is putting out there for the media to save face so that nobody will criticize them and people want to call them ducks. George Kambosos Jr. is a flat-out duck. Now let's talk about it. George Kambosos, before he fought Teofimo Lopez, was in communications with Devin Haney, the true WBC 135-pound champion. George Kambosos was in talks with Devin Haney to make the fight should he beat Teofimo Lopez. Devin Haney rooted for George Kambosos. We all rooted for him to go out there and upset Teofimo Lopez, since Teofimo Lopez chose to duck Devin Haney as well. Okay? George Kambosos wins the belt, and then all of a sudden, start acting brand new, right? He started talking about, well, we said, well, are you going to fight Devin Haney? Well, we got to see how things look. If it makes sense, and if Haney looks good, and I still have got to go check out,
I would somewhat agree with what 78 Sports TV is saying. Listen, what I said is this, and I'm overall pretty much standing on this hill. I think overall that more than likely George Kambosos is going to try to go after that Vasyl Lomachenko fight. And if it's not going to be the Vasyl Lomachenko fight, he's probably going to try to go after Ryan Garcia. But we'll see what happens. That's even if Ryan Garcia and Oscar De La Hoya would accept that fight, which maybe they would. Because Oscar De La Hoya and Ryan Garcia, they may look at that as a golden opportunity. Because like I said, anyone who really knows what they're watching with George Kambosos, don't get me wrong, very decent fighter. But do I see him overall defending those unified titles for a very long time against elite caliber fighters? Absolutely not.
Tank Davis's fight as well to see who looks the best. So he made it some type of bidding war. Okay? So he then says he's going to fight Devin Haney again. So we say, okay, cool. George Kambosos is going to be a man of his word. He's going to fight Devin Haney. Now these lies are coming out that the fight is halted. The negotiations have stopped over financials, right? In reality, Team Haney, Bill Haney, the father of Devin Haney, has cleared up today on Trill Boxing Talk. He said, these are all lies. He said that the only offers that have been made so far have been offers from Team Haney to George Kambosos. They have already presented Kambosos with an offer to make the fight. They haven't even gotten to the part where they find out what Devin Haney's going to make. They're trying to figure out what's going to take to get George Kambosos in the ring. Okay? However, what's really going on here is that Lou DiBella, George Kambosos' handler, right, he's a man without a home. Okay? He's a wandering idiot. And Lou DiBella is trying to get some type of deal to extend the lifeline of George Kambosos. right? He wants a network deal. He wants somebody to sign Kambosos to a multi-fight deal is what he's looking for. So they're trying to duck Devin Haney and go around Team Haney in order to make a side deal with DAZN. They want DAZN to pay them, okay, to fight some nobody, where George Kambosos can go back to Australia, fight some nobody, all right, look good against some nobody, and then have a so that's one payday, then get another payday, possibly fighting Ryan Garcia, right? The same Ryan Garcia who allegedly has mental health issues, right?
We'll see overall which fight ends up happening next for Mr. George Kambosos. It'll be very interesting. I don't know if he's just going to face some random mandatory next or if he's going to face someone that's just a nobody. But like I said, we'll see what happens.
Always having some type of injury, stepping away from boxing for personal reasons and all of this stuff, right? The same Ryan Garcia. The same Ryan Garcia who claims he wants to fight every time Devin Haney has an opponent. Ryan Garcia put his nose in it because he wants to steal Devin Haney's opponents. Ryan Garcia fought Luke Campbell to become Devin Haney's mandatory, right? Then when he beats Luke Campbell, the man on DAZN in front of the whole world tells everybody he's not fighting the champion Devin Haney. He wants Tank Davis. Then when Tank Davis says, "Okay, let's go, Ryan," he says, "No, Tank, I don't want to fight you. I got something better in Manny Pacquiao."
Basically, what 78 Sports TV is saying is that Ryan Garcia was full of shit. And listen, I have to agree with that. And listen, I don't mind Ryan Garcia, but at the end of the day, Ryan Garcia, just like Gervonta Tank Davis, he allegedly calls out some of these big names, but then when it actually comes time to rise up to the occasion, he just didn't. It is what it is.
Yeah, looks at him and said, "I don't know what you're talking about. These are lies." So Ryan Garcia is a clout chaser. He's a kid who they want to believe DAZN, Golden Boy are desperate to make this kid a star. They're trying to sell him on his look. They're trying to tell you that this kid is some teenage heartthrob. He got 8 million Instagram followers. None of those followers have translated into dollars. If the kid was a star, they would have put him on pay-per-view. He's not selling out no.
Right, but come on. Are you really going to compare Ryan Garcia to pay-per-view? He's not facing anyone overall to be on pay-per-view. So we can't compare Ryan Garcia to someone like a Gervonta Tank Davis at the current moment in time because he's not facing opponents overall that are going to be put on, pay-per-view. What, was Ryan Garcia versus Luke Campbell going to be on pay-per-view? Like, come on. That's a stupid point. But it is what it is. Don't get me wrong. I understand a little bit what 78 Sports TV is saying. But do I think all in all that... Do I think overall that Ryan Garcia is just, oh my, he's his popularity isn't up there? No, Ryan Garcia's popularity is up there. You know how I know that? Because every time I've talked about Ryan Garcia on my channel, it's always usually one of the most viewed videos out there. When I had that Ryan Garcia versus Luke Campbell fight prediction, which had to have been at the beginning of last year in 2021, I believe, it ended up getting over 1,000 views within 3 days. And that was when my channel was even nowhere near as big as what it is now. And of course, I don't have a super duper big channel. Of course, I only have around 600 something subscribers. And of course, I thank you all very much for that. But at the end of the day, like I said, I can tell who has star power and who doesn't. It's not that hard to tell. It just is what it is. Ryan Garcia, you can tell that he overall, in terms of the charisma or in terms of at least the star power, in terms of the look, especially overall with his physical look when it comes down to, because of course, as 78 Sports TV just said, he's looked at overall as this teenage heartthrob. He's basically looked at, when it comes down to it, almost as what, I don't want to say Oscar De La Hoya when it comes down to it, but, the teenage heartthrob, I think, is right on the money. Ryan Garcia, every time that he has talked about, the ears overall are open. So like I said, no, Ryan Garcia has star power.
Arenas, he's not selling pay-per-views. There is no demand for Ryan Garcia. It's a myth. It's a lie. Okay?
I don't think it's a lie whatsoever. I think that if Ryan Garcia versus George Kambosos were to be announced tomorrow, it would be one of the bigger fights of 2021, and there would be millions, not even just thousands, millions of people watching it.
Created by the media. So many people are totally invested in this kid, Ryan Garcia, because they feel like he should be a star. He has to look.
If you were to take a look at the followers that Ryan Garcia has versus the followers that Devin Haney has, I mean, I don't know personally. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but I'm betting you that Ryan Garcia probably has about double, if not even more, the followers that Devin Haney has. Now, maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe Devin Haney even has more followers than what Ryan Garcia has. But like I said, Devin Haney, I'm not quite sure if he has the star power of any of the other options available to George Kambosos. And like I said, I would like to see Devin Haney get a shot as well. But George Kambosos, I understand why he's going after some of those other options. But we'll see what happens.
This is boxing, man. This is not no modeling contest, okay? This is not the flavor of love. This is not who wants to be a...
Well, at the end of the day, yes, this is boxing. But guess what? Looks sell. It is what it is. And Ryan Garcia has the look when it comes down to it, and it attracts a lot of attention to him. Just like it did with Oscar De La Hoya, just like it did with a certain amount of other boxers who maybe have the look or the teenage heartthrob look. All right? It is what it is. Or Pretty Boy Floyd, when he overall was getting into the game when it came down to it. There are certain people overall that have the look, or Paige Van Zandt with the UFC. She lost almost every big fight in her career, but every single time that she was on, she'd get a decent amount of views. Because not only was she highly promoted, but people overall want to see not only with a certain amount of people that like her, but a certain amount of people that hate her and wonder, is this, kid for real or is she not? So Ryan Garcia, whether you love him or hate him, he's going to get a decent amount of attention no matter who he faces next.
Millionaire, right? This is not The Bachelor. This is boxing. I don't need grown men telling me that somebody else look like they should be a star. All right? Bottom line is this. Don't be fooled. George Kambosos and his team are ducking Devin Haney if they don't take this fight. You have one fight to prove that you are the best at 135, that you are truly undisputed.
Right, but there's a lot of people that don't even believe that Devin Haney is the best at 135. There's a lot of people actually that don't even believe that Devin Haney is within the top two. Now, would I necessarily agree with that? I would say that Devin Haney, in terms of skills, actually, if you're talking about the whole entire scope, yeah, Gervonta Tank Davis and Vasyl Lomachenko in terms of skills would probably be the top two. But like I said, if he were to face Vasyl Lomachenko next, I can't necessarily have a problem with that. But even Ryan Garcia, I can't really have a huge problem with.
Teofimo Lopez had that opportunity. He chose to duck. Tio talked a good game. We all rooted for him to beat Lomachenko because, see, we got to go all the way back. Lomachenko ducked Devin Haney. He didn't want to fight Devin Haney.
Well, Lomachenko certainly did not seem super interested in facing Devin Haney. That's what I'll say. But Lomachenko overall, he did face a very great opponent, probably a better opponent at the time, in Teofimo Lopez.
Lomachenko requested.
But that's what I'm saying about Devin Haney. Devin Haney is going to have a very rough patch, in my opinion, because he's probably just like Demetrius Bobo-Andrade or Guillermo Rigondeaux. He's going to be forced to make decisions in certain times that he probably does not want to make, but it just is what it is. Because when I take a look at Devin Haney, I don't think he's a star. And I know a lot of people, they're going to get after me for that. They're going to say, oh, what are you talking about? You're just getting after him because of this. Listen, at the end of the day, I know who is a star and I know who is not a star. And I'm not talking about in terms of, boxing ability. When I take a look at Devin Haney, I do think he is a very decent boxer. But when I take a look at his promotion, when I take a look overall at how many fans he has, overall how many people talk about him, he just doesn't have the same amount of star power as some of the other possible contenders that George Kambosos could face. So George Kambosos is basically looking at it and saying, you know what, if I'm possibly going to give up my titles or if I'm going to be in a very, very tough fight, I might as well get a hell of a payday. And not only that, if I end up losing to one of these guys, it could do better for my future career. And then maybe later on, I could have Devin Haney to rely on.
All right? He requested to be the franchise.
It's almost like when Sergio Martinez, when he did not want to face Gennady Triple G Golovkin. He said, I don't want to fight that dude because not only is that dude possibly going to whoop my ass, but when it comes down to it, he has no star appeal at the current moment in time. So if I'm going to get my ass whooped, I might as well get my ass whooped overall against the first ballot Hall of Famer when it comes down to it, and I might as well get paid. And of course, that fighter was against Puerto Rican superstar Miguel Cotto.
As champion. Rather than fight Devin Haney. He wanted to be the franchise champion. The WBC helped him, and they rewarded him with a franchise belt, right? So he can duck. They said the belt was not transferable. Teofimo Lopez, he gets the Lomachenko fight. He asked the WBC, he requested for the WBC, can he be the franchise champion? He knew Devin Haney was waiting in the win, the real WBC champion. But Teofimo Lopez beats Lomachenko and decide he's going to duck Devin Haney as well. Okay? George Kambosos steps in, beats Teofimo Lopez, and now he's ducking Devin Haney. Like, what's going on? This is pathetic. I don't know how these dudes call themselves fight.
The thing that's going on is that Devin Haney does not have superstar appeal. That's what's going on. And it's unfortunate for Devin Haney, but it just is what it is. Like I said, Devin Haney is a person that, when it comes down to it, unfortunately for him, he's a fighter on the know that there's just nothing, in my opinion, that pops up on the page about him. I mean, when you take a look at Devin Haney, in my opinion, he more blends in than what he does stick out. That's not me saying all in all that he is not a decent fighter. But do I take a look at Devin Haney as a superstar? No, to me, he's another Demetrius Boo Andrade. It just is what it is. Now, that's not me saying that he does not have decent boxing ability. He could potentially beat a lot of the guys at 135. He could potentially beat George Kambosos. I think that more than likely he would. He could potentially even beat a Vasyl Lomachenko. He could potentially beat a Ryan Garcia. He could potentially beat any of those guys. Do I think that he'd beat a Gervonta Tank Davis? More than likely not, but who even knows? He may even have a chance against him. But none of those guys are rushing to face Devin Haney when it comes down to it, because not only is he a potentially dangerous fight, but he really has no star appeal. It just is what it is.
And George Kambosos need to cut this Spartan mess out. All right? Cut all, I'm a Spartan. Man, cut it out. Okay? You a coward. You a duck artist. That's what you are. Don't talk about it, be about it. If you are who you say you are, fight Devin Haney. It shouldn't be this hard to make a boxing match. You don't believe in yourself, so you're trying to extend your lifeline. You're trying to get a few easy fights in to extend your paydays because you know.
Well, if you were to face against Vasyl Lomachenko or Ryan Garcia next, let me tell you what, neither of those fights would be easy. And to be honest with you, he may not even be the favorite in either of those fights.
Once you fight Devin Haney, you're going to get beat. You know the same thing Teofimo Lopez knew. So you're a coward. And if the boxing fans and the boxing media allows George Kambosos to get away with this nonsense, then you're going to get exactly what you deserve from boxing. This is a simple fight to make. Kambosos has been given a good offer from Team Haney. More money than he's ever made. If he doesn't accept it, he's just a coward, period. There's no other word to describe it.
Well, like I said, and I know a certain amount of people are going to take a look at me and they're going to say, oh, what are you saying this for? Overall, they're just blockading the black fighter. Listen, what I'll say is this. Is there maybe a little bit of that? Yes. And do I think that because Devin Haney, that he is of the black fighter complexion when it comes down to it, and certain, as new media would call them, old media outlets, that it's a little bit difficult to promote certain fighters like that. At least they don't like to promote them in a certain way. You can certainly argue that when it comes down to it. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. But at the end of the day, like I said, when I take a look at Devin Haney, I just don't see someone overall that has superstar appeal. He reminds me of another Demetrius Boo Andrade, which means what? Eventually he's probably going to have to move up in weight, and he's going to have to probably take some opportunities there. That's why he already called out Gary Antoine Russell. So we'll see all in all what happens.
You understand? Now Kambosos is magically gone quiet on social media. He has so much to say. You know what I'm saying? He had so much to say before. Now he's magically quiet. It's ridiculous. What they're doing to Devin Haney is unacceptable in boxing. It really is. They're trying to force this kid to move up in weight without ever giving him the opportunity to prove that he's the best at 135. You got Devin Haney tried to fight.
Well, once overall you were possibly able to get a big win, people overall are going to fluctuate towards you a little bit more. The problem is that Devin Haney, like I said, there are certain fighters that once upon a time, they were avoided, and then eventually they were able to get the big fights. Like, whether you talk about Gennady Triple G Golovkin, or even an Errol Spence Jr., or someone else of that sort. But you know the difference between a Gennady Golovkin and an Errol Spence Jr.? When people take a look at their performances, they say, wow, this dude really stands out from the norm. When you take a look at Devin Haney, I'm not saying that to a degree he does not stand out from the norm, but besides some, sharpness and slickness, and I'm not trying to downplay that. I'm not trying to say that overall that's not good. Devin Haney is a very good fighter. But when you take a look at him, it's like watching Demetrius Boo Andrade. To me, there's just nothing that I say, oh my God, wow, you gotta watch this. Like, there's just nothing about Devin Haney that is like that. And unfortunately for Devin Haney, almost everyone else in that division, besides George Kambosos Jr., they pretty much have more star appeal.
Lomachenko wanted no parts of the fight. He tried to fight Ryan Garcia.
Because Lomachenko, of course, is a Caucasian fighter who is going to be highly promoted with that atop rank. So he's going to have a certain amount of the fan base there. He has a great fan base, a great cult of personality when it comes at it with them. And on top of that, he is a tremendous fighter. He is a highly skilled fighter. And people want to watch Lomachenko. Because when you watch Lomachenko, he appears from the norm. You take a look at Lomachenko and you feel like you are watching an all-time great fighter, whether you believe he is one or not. When you take a look at Devin Haney, all he feels like he basically feels like a poor man's version of Floyd Mayweather Jr. That's all he feels like. It just is what it is. Once again, that's not me trying to say that Devin Haney does not possibly deserve a shot, but some people overall have star power, some people don't.
Fights to beat Devin Haney's mandatory and then ducks him. Right? He tried to fight Luke Campbell. Luke Campbell wanted no parts of it. Right? He tried to fight Tank Davis. Mayweather Promotions won't make that fight.
Mayweather Promotions won't make that fight. Well, why don't you also tell the truth? Gervonta Tank Davis doesn't seem super duper interested in that fight either. So it is what it is. Because Gervonta Tank Davis is thinking the same shit overall that everyone else is thinking. It is what it is. Devin Haney, there's just nothing that pops up about the page about him. It is what it is.
They don't want to pay Devin Haney. Right? So on and so forth. You can keep going on with these guys at 135 that's afraid of Devin Haney. He tried to fight Teofimo Lopez. He don't want to fight. He's trying to fight George Kambosos. He don't want to fight. So they're trying to force Devin Haney to go up to 140 before ever letting him prove how good he is at 135 in his own division. You see? It's disgusting. It's despicable. And this is why I am not paying for any more boxing matches that I didn't ask for. If it's not a fighter that...
You go ahead and do that, 78. We all know that you're going to watch the fight anyway. Just these guys always say, I'm not even going to watch this fight. Yes, you are. It is what it is, because people can overall say this at the end of the day. George Kambosos versus Vasyl Lomachenko, or George Kambosos versus Ryan Garcia, that's must-watch TV. Or Gervonta Tank Davis versus George Kambosos. Devin Haney versus George Kambosos still is must-watch TV, but it's not as must-watch TV as some of the other ones, in my opinion. And that's why I think George Kambosos, do I think overall that he believes that Devin Haney maybe is a little bit more than what he could handle? You certainly can argue that. I can tell by his energy that he doesn't seem super-duper confident and overall maybe beating that of a Devin Haney, So, unfortunately for Devin Haney, he's just very high risk, but not as much reward.
I just want to support this fighter. I'm not buying nothing. I'm not buying nothing. I'm not buying nothing they're selling. I don't care. I'm going to stream it. They can get mad all they want to until y'all start giving us simple fights. Now we talking about, look, Shakur Stevenson, Oscar Valdez. This is a fight. This is a regular fight. We should be able to get that fight. Now they talking about Valdez hasn't signed the contract. I'm not finna beg these dudes for regular fights, man. This is not even an undisputed matchup. Valdez versus Shakur Stevenson. What are they waiting on? Make the fight.
Oscar Valdez is going to have to face Shakur Stevenson eventually. Because one thing I'll say about Shakur Stevenson is this. No, Shakur Stevenson is not what I would call a knockout artist, but one thing that Shakur Stevenson does have is somewhat a star appeal. When you take a look at Shakur Stevenson, he's different than that of a Devin Haney. Shakur Stevenson actually pops off the page. So what does that mean? That means when you take a look at Shakur Stevenson, you feel like you're watching something that you just don't see that often. So it is what it is. So like I said, Shakur, whether he wants to take that fight next or not, or, within the next couple of fights, he's going to be forced into that fight eventually. It is what it is. So we'll see what happens.
So anyway, that's my 2 cents on the matter. Y'all let me know what y'all think. Smash that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and share the video. 78 Sports TV. Salute to the mighty LDBC, and I holla.
But anyways, that also was my 2 cents on the situation as well. I just thought that I would talk about that. But we'll see all in all what happens with this situation. I don't believe more than likely that the Ryan Garcia versus George Kambosos fight would happen next. But more than likely, I think that Vasyl Lomachenko is more than likely going to get that opportunity. And that is a great thing, I think, for Mr. Vasyl Lomachenko, because that will prove to us overall if he truly is still on that higher level or not. So we'll see all in all what happens, because if Vasyl Lomachenko is going to maybe even have a chance to crawl back within that top 5 pound for pound, in my opinion, he's going to have to beat George Kambosos and do it somewhat dominantly. So we'll see what happens. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to y'all later.